Hey everyone, and welcome to Uncomfortable Conversations. I'm your host, Michaela Richards, and in this episode, we're joined by 3 educators to dive into the state of teaching in Georgia. Changes in education take center stage as we address the barriers these educators have faced in their roles, from navigating legislative changes to addressing literacy concerns. We uncover the hurdles they've overcome to provide quality education. First, let's introduce our educators, Vina Black, Ian Altman, and Mike Buchanan. How did you get into the field to begin with?
I went to school in New Jersey. I went to Rutgers University, and I was actually pursuing engineering. So I was looking for a part-time job, and so she actually referred me, and I loved it. I loved being around kids, and they actually said, you should pursue teaching. Mm-hmm. So I left engineering and transferred my major to education.
And through, I guess, this experience, have you thought about leaving the field at all, or?
No, but what's really funny is, I've taught everything. For 21 years, I've taught elementary education, special education, gifted, lots of different fields with students. And then now I'm teaching STEM, which is trying to persuade students to pursue engineering. So in a way, I've come full circle, and I wondered what would have been like if I had stayed with it, but I think enjoying it even more, getting other kids excited to pursue fields of their choice.
Is that your main motivation, you think, for staying in it, or?
Yes, because I'm a learner. I always want to try new things. So even with STEM, I didn't know about STEM education. Someone actually offered it to me, and I wanted to learn about it, and then I ended up loving it. So I'm always trying to educate myself so that I can become a better educator.
Yeah, no, I like that you went from engineering, the field, and brought it back to teaching.
There was a time that I left for a couple of years, but people kept saying to me, I can tell you're a teacher. I can tell you're a teacher.
Yeah.
So I went back to it again.
I took a very roundabout way into teaching. Initially had no interest in it. What probably started the consciousness that I might be a teacher is I took a seminar in political ethics, which was focused entirely on the question of secession.
I want to know why you left.
Why I left teaching?
Yeah.
Well, I had done it for 32 years.
Okay.
I still loved it. It was great. The kids were wonderful. But I had some other things in my life. I started writing, and I had written a book that was doing okay, and we were in the middle of making a movie out of one of them, and I was like, God, I can't dedicate 100% to both of these things. And so I felt like it was time. Teaching was, like I said, it was great, but it was kind of time to go try a different journey. Mm-hmm. And so I did that, and I was going to teach half days for a while, and then the economy changed, and they couldn't afford half-day teachers.
You did do your time, so I'll give it to you. I'll give you 32 years.
Okay. But you were asking how we got into teaching and all that?
Yeah.
I met this guy that had been a teacher at my old school, my high school. And he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to grad school. But you come teach math. You were good at math. And I said, well, I don't have all my certification or anything. He said, well, we really need math teachers. We'll figure it out. And so I was 21 years old, and this was in the beginning of August. And by the middle of August, they said, here's the key to your room. Here's the teacher's additions. Don't break anything. And off I went. And so I think in a way that helped me as a teacher, because I was totally myself. I didn't have any training, which, training is great to learn all the aspects of teaching and everything, but there's nothing like getting in there and doing it. Mm-hmm. And so I was just kind of thrown to the wolves, and I was at a smaller high school down by the airport in Hapeville, and everybody just embraced me, and so it was a really great situation to start. And once I was in it, I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. And so off I went.
I say things feels very standardized now, I feel like, in teaching. How has like teaching changed as far as like training and the standardization over the years for you?
So I started teaching in Texas. That's where I began my teaching career. I remember being able to teach anything I wanted as long as the kids were learning how to read. Now, I mean, there's a lot more pressure now, it seems, for teachers. We are testing, which I do understand we need testing to know where the kids are, especially at the elementary level. In kindergarten, you're having students coming in. Some of them are already behind. It's not equitable anymore. So students are looking at each other, hey, this kid already knows how to sight words, he already knows how to read sentences, or they know how to write their name. They know their ABCs, but then a few other students don't even know how to write their name, so they're already realizing. And I read somewhere that your self-esteem is already developed by age 3. So they're coming in, they're noticing that they're behind, and so now the kindergarten teachers are trying to catch them up. They're falling behind, and then so that's where I've realized I've seen that in the elementary level, and teachers struggling. But it's not just academic. We're also, we take care of them in every way, socially, emotionally. We wear so many hats as educators, and even the problems that we get. I mean, we've had students that are homeless. We don't know who is homeless, because that's all confidential also, but we have no idea what backgrounds are coming in, what's going on at home. And so we have to take the kids where they're at. If they're having a bad day, it could be because they didn't have a meal, they had an empty stomach, they didn't eat breakfast that day, they didn't get a good night's sleep. So with all that, you have to realize that, and it goes into the testing too.
And how have you seen that play out?
I'm going to get myself in trouble, but that's okay.
Go for it.
All right, that's all right. The standards-based experiment for the last 20 years, and it's been going more than 20 years, really, but it's been a 20-year failed experiment. We're wondering why kids can't read, or at least don't read, and it's because we're making reading just a school task, and and I mean, even just like basic literary elements, like everyone knows what a symbol in literature is, right? It's pretty basic. And so what that means as far as standards goes is that the standards are not actually standards. They presume an object of knowledge which is not actually a single object of knowledge. The testing doesn't mean anything, right? Our testing data for high school English is not actually data. It's just frustrating. It's not really anyone's fault, and no one's really talking about any of that in that way.
The standardized testing, I don't know anybody that enjoys it. There's nobody that wants to be part of it, and yet it's become part of our society somehow. And it's like an American thing where we want to have numbers for judging and for defining people and to rank people in schools and all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't really measure teaching. It doesn't measure what we want, how we want our kids to become as an adult. When they're adults, you want them to be well-rounded and have like some character skills and to have a passion for art or whatever it might be, for reading and things like that. And you can't stick a question in front of a kid and say, which of these 4 options is correct, and know that you're measuring who they will be. It's a sore subject for a lot of teachers, and it's talked about all the time. And like he said, the research doesn't really show that it's useful. It doesn't measure how successful a kid's going to be when they're 25. Mm-hmm. I would rather spend that time teaching a kid about something meaningful. Or like when I was teaching, I was always having speakers come in. And I was very lucky in the years I taught that my administrators allowed me to be creative. Right? And there's never been a sentence in the in history in which creativity and standardized testing is in the same sentence. That's never taken place. And so the fact that I was allowed to be creative and bring in people and read books in trig class and do all kind of things and launch rockets and whatever it might be. And it wasn't just people that were coming in to talk about math. I had the Lost Boys of Sudan come in. I had a Holocaust survivor come in. Because there's more about learning than just what's in the book. I mean, uncomfortable conversations talk about testing in schools and all the time it takes for preparing for it and administering it, and the counselors, it drives them nuts, and the administrators are judged by it. And some of the best teaching I've ever seen was in schools that were struggling, and it was a teacher who kept a kid in school or got that kid to make a C or kept him from going home and killing himself. However it pans out, measuring a teacher by a number on a piece of paper or a kid by a number is not doing anybody any justice at all.
Well, that's another thing. They're all computerized now, standardized testing, but then we teach them on paper. So they go from reading books and working on whatever, and then they have to go in front of a computer and have to figure out which choice it is and write essays and go back. So the kids have to learn how to go back to another page and figure out what is the answer. And then we go back and look, why did this kid go down? And teachers are freaking out. Oh my goodness, I know I did my very best. It shows their scores went down, and then it reflects on the teacher. But then you look and see how long the student took on the test. They took 5 minutes. They went click, 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 because they were just ready to get it over with.
Right.
So they are capable, but that test told you that they did not do well. Yeah. And they look back at the teacher. What did you not do correctly? What else could you have done? How could you increase their scores?
Something else that drove me nuts about all that is like I finished up in an affluent area, and the kids were great, and it was a lot of support, but it was a lot of testing support, where so many of the kids after school they would go for SAT prep, and in some of the other schools I taught in, they didn't have access to that. It's not a level playing field when it comes to judging somebody by testing, and so it's just all a bunch of malarkey to me.
I say, adding on top of that, recent legislation that's been passed in Georgia, being able to help your students and also, craft your courses.
I mean, this is right up my alley, but, teaching English, right? It's my first reaction to all of that is that it's terribly funny. All the book banning, all that stuff. Look at the classics. Romeo and Juliet is in every ninth grade anthology. Act 2, Scene 1. It's full of pornographic imagery. I still teach Toni Morrison's novels. I still teach James Baldwin, his stories, his essays. No one's complained about that. And I do ask some pretty hard, challenging questions. Is there such a thing as a unified American identity? Or are we all, by nature, hyphenated, right? Or, that's a controversial question. I wish that politicians would go back and reread and maybe pay closer attention to the things that they were supposed to have read when they were in high school. Mm-hmm.
The underlying assumption of all of this, legislation and book banning and whatever it might be, is that teachers are up to something. We have a hidden agenda. We don't.
Right.
We don't. We go to school and we do the best we can, and we expect that out of our students and out of the administrators and the parents and the community and all that. But we're not up there trying to create something that's out of, that matches how we feel or think like that. I mean, it's great to have conversations about stuff. That's what life's about, is there are other opinions besides yours. I know this teacher, and people that she didn't even know who they were came in and started taking books off her shelf. And she told me, she said, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And she'd been teaching 11 or 12 years, whether it's politicians or other groups that think they know better. Get in there and sit in a class for a few weeks and see how things are going. I'm sure in his class and in hers too, and when I was teaching, it was open and it was vibrant and it was the way you want to have students engaged. You don't, if you tell somebody that you can't do this and you can't read that, well, then that's not serving anybody. That's probably the first thing you want to go read anyway.
That's right.
As soon as you tell them they can't read it. And so the whole thing of teachers are trying to have a secret agenda that is so off base. And a lot of it is politicians who are finding a way to create a wedge or to get people all wired and think that, well, that guy is out to save my child. And that's not the case at all. There's nothing to save them from except lack of education.
You mentioned earlier about how when you realize being in front of your students, it's so wonderful because you get to watch their sparks in their eyes when you've taught them something that they didn't understand, and it's exciting. Now I feel like it's just not you there. There's so many voices in there. It's not. We're not even talking about our administrators or even the district or the state,
Right.
and that's what it's become. And I remember during the pandemic when we had to go virtually, we were on stage for everybody. So it's just become that where it's no matter what we do, it's like, what have you not done enough? So we have to, I think the teachers have all come together now. Like, we all support each other, but we're fighting a battle with so many people wanting to come into our room and telling us how to do it.
Yeah, it's almost like you didn't get the teaching degree.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
And you think during the pandemic, coming out the back end of it, every parent would go, wow, we love teachers.
Yes.
Right.
Because we had to be the teacher for 2 kids. How do you do 140?
Right.
Or 400?
Well, they complain when we have so many days off too.
Right.
We need childcare. We need,
Yeah.
And then already our students are behind now because of the pandemic. We're still
Right.
kids. That's one of the things we talked about kindergarten. We can already tell when you see a 3rd grader, oh, they were at this age during the pandemic. They didn't get the social skills. They didn't get this, So we can already pinpoint how behind our kids are because of the pandemic.
Yeah. So like you're saying, you would think that after the pandemic, the parents would be like, thank you, teachers. We love you,
Well, we talked about book banning.
Yeah.
There's also other pieces of legislation also. We already talked about teacher salaries.
Yeah.
But I'm actually currently on the Georgia Department of Education, one of the teacher policy fellows. There's 20 of us, and we're all trying to write legislations right now, hoping to make an impact. But one of the things we talked about in our cohort was about, how even our paraprofessionals, our teacher's assistant, they don't make enough as it is.
Yes.
And so when they retire, they wouldn't be able to even buy groceries for the week. It's ridiculous of how much they're getting paid. And they've also taken away funding from education. So you've cut funding, and then you're expecting so much out of schools when they don't have. And it's not equitable. We talk from one school to another. We have affluent schools because they have a great PTA, versus other schools that are poor and no parental support. So there's so many obstacles for teachers depending on where you teach.
I feel like that kind of touches on, I wanted to ask about retention as far as what you've seen in your district. Not necessarily just retention, but hiring new teachers. The difficulty, or has it been difficult?
I think that fewer students are interested in becoming teachers. I don't know that there's a single reason for that. I think it's probably a combination of general recognition of the importance of the job and the respect that we are due. There's a perception that that teachers can't make enough money to persist all the way into retirement. And I do think that Georgia has taken some steps to increase, to do better. I think that there is legislative awareness of that. But it's not just the money. It's also I mean, look at how teachers are like publicly seen, and like I'm not sure that I would advise any of my students that to become teachers. I mean, I hate to say that, but you know, I wouldn't wish that stress on anyone.
I know many of my colleagues who are burned out. You know, I keep doing things that I love. That's why I can keep going. But I also know teachers who've left the profession. They just didn't want to deal with observations, that they're not doing enough because of the test scores, and you know, or, parents. A lot of it is also parents, you know, coming in and getting upset with them. So it was just for all those reasons they can make more money elsewhere. Teachers are actually highly sought after for businesses. You know, we're so great. We wear, like I said earlier, we wear so many hats that we can do well in other professions. So I know a lot of teachers have left to start their own businesses or pursue other professions.
When students come back and contact me 4 years after I had them in my class, or 6 years, when they're on their way through college, they'll contact me and say, now I get it. Now I really understand what you were trying to do. That's what tells me that that I'm doing the job well. It's not my professional evaluations, and it's not the test scores, it's not the paycheck. It's just, you know, the student recognition. But you have to wait a long time. Students might hate you by the end of the class. You might have failed them, right? But and they come back, you know, the day after and say, why did I make an F? Well, you know, you explain why, and then they leave. But then, like 4 years later, you see them out somewhere, and they're like your best friend, and they thank you for like showing what's real,
holding them accountable, expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, all the you know, good teachers have expectations. They tell you right up front, this is how it's going to be, and they stick with it.
Right.
And like, you know, I tell my students, like, well, I got to give you this stupid syllabus, but here are the rules of the class. Do your best and let everybody else do their best. And if you violate either one of those, I'll let you know about it. So, but as far as retention goes, well, it's sad that he would say, and I can tell that both of these are wonderful teachers, but, you know, and we've all had these thoughts, like, I'm not sure I would recommend teaching for somebody, you know, because of all the stress and all the paperwork. And I don't know how English teachers do it. I mean, with math, I would take home a few papers to grade, and it's a little bit easier to grade math. But the English teacher, they have like wheelbarrows going out of the school with all the papers they had to read and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I couldn't do that. And I was lucky. I was single all the years I was teaching. And so I could make do on a teacher's salary. But I don't know how a lot of people can make that. I mean, that's why a lot of teachers have second jobs, or you know, the spouse has to work and things like that to make it work. And but as far as the retention goes, I never understood why the teachers in their first few years are excited about being there. They're not going into it for the pay. They're not going into it so they can work themselves from 7 in the morning till 8 at night. They're going into it because they want to make a difference. They want to try to do something right for the world. And then within a few years, they're going, man, I don't know about this. What happens in those first few years? Because if you can make it to year 4 or 5, you're probably okay. You've kind of figured it out a little bit. But in those first few years, we're losing a lot of teachers who just like, no, this isn't for me. And so I always wondered why we don't have teacher coaches. You know, I mean, I know some systems do and things like that, but for a kid who is, I mean, for a teacher who is new, help them out. Don't just say, have at it, good luck, and then in May you go, well, here's all the things you screwed up on. Help them along the way. And I think retention would be there, because why spend all the money in finding new teachers and spend a little bit of money in keeping the ones you got by making them feel welcome and cared for, and realize it's not all about that your academic knowledge. It's about all those other things in the classroom that's going to make or break you. And to do that would be incredibly valuable.
So to speak on that, we actually have teacher coaches in our building. I'm actually doing the teacher support coaching specialist in my county. We have 6 teachers in my building being trained how to do that. And we have brand new teachers or teachers who are struggling. And then we have one-on-one, and we give them support and become, developing relationships. And so we're actually doing that, which is awesome. And then also for retention, my district also has started a program where they're training paraprofessionals who want to pursue teaching but cannot afford to go back to school, getting them training and giving them a living stipend, and then they'll get to teach in the county after they finish, and they'll end up with a master's. So some districts are really trying to solve the retention.
What support do you want to see for teaching, coming from the district, coming from parents, students? I mean, what kind of support do you need?
I have so many wonderful parents in my school, and I think it depends on where you're at. But I also think there are a lot of teachers who are afraid to speak up. So I think if they actually say what they need and what they want, that's why we have the teacher supports coaches now, to make sure that they know that they are allowed to. You don't have all the answers. It's okay to ask for help. So asking the community for support, asking parents for support. Hopefully every school has a PTA, and even the poorer schools have Title I funding. So there's ways to get support. But I think the majority of that is not being afraid to say what you want. But the younger teachers are, they need someone to know that there's so many resources out there.
I think that higher level administrators, district office, state offices, they need to read better stacks of books and change the theories by which they operate. As I said before, it's the standards-based experience or experiment is it's a 20-year failure. It's just not working. And in high school English, we could just go back to teaching books as books. That would solve some problem. It wouldn't solve every problem, but it would solve some problems. And for parents, I think most parents are doing exactly the best they can possibly do. I think that administration, I think that they certainly mean well, or else they wouldn't be in the job. But I think they need to change the theories by which they operate. The backwards design has to go. The standards-based curriculum and planning has to go. It's a failed experiment.
Like they said, the parents that I worked with, for the most part, they were wonderful. And they understood that you're up there trying to do well for their kids. And something I always found interesting, if you ask any parent, what do you want in life? Well, they want their kids to have every opportunity, right? And then you go, well, what person is more in their life than anybody else? Their teacher, right? Even sometimes more hours spent with that kid than the parents do. To recognize that the teachers are trying to do the best they can for your kid. It's not just throwing money at the problem. That's great, that helps. But ask teachers, say, what would make your life better? What would make you feel good about coming to school every day? What would make you feel that you could do this for another 20 years? But talk to the teachers. I think one of the problems, especially in the South, is there are no unions. And so the school systems and the politicians and everybody, they kind of have teachers under their thumb because we don't have too much recourse. We don't band together as much as we should. Like you were saying, a lot of new teachers especially were like, I really don't get this, but I don't want to let anybody know that I don't get this. And so it just kind of creates this big muddy, situation. And but support-wise, it's give me resources. Allow me to be creative.
I almost feel like we have a script now what we have to say. Make sure you have stated the objective. Make sure, we have the I can statements and success criteria and learning targets. And so that, we have lesson plans. Lesson plans are like 10 pages long for 1 week, and then which we don't have
Right.
time to sit there and look at it. I mean,
they change in
we
30
already
minutes.
know, and we adapt too. Hey, this lesson's not going to work. You change it right away. We're awesome about that.
Mm-hmm.
But so when you have where are your standards posted? Where are the learning target? Do your children, do your students know their I can statements, and so those kind of things. I mean, I always let my students know, do you know if what you're learning? I mean, as long as the kids know what I'm teaching you and you understand it, that's right there. Just ask the students, what are you learning? There's your proof.
Yep. On that note, like we were all been saying, the climate of the school matters so much. So because I wrote a book and all this stuff, I do a lot of talks in schools. And in the first 5 minutes, I can walk into school and know how this school feels. And it's like, are these people are here trying to get things done? Or they're all just adhering to are you doing this, doing that? Everybody's kind of, not everybody's on the same page, and it's not a happy place. Mm-hmm. And so all of that needs to be looked at. It's a bigger problem we can figure out in an hour or in a year probably of talking about this. But so you're talking about the teachers and all. We all want our kids to go out and be whoever they're going to be, right? Mm-hmm. And then we tell the teachers, now y'all be just like each other. And everybody has to be on the same page. And on day 3, you better be doing this lesson and on page
right.
and whatever. My girlfriend taught elementary school. She had a script. You talking about scripts? A literal script. She had to read. And every day you would read this stuff here, and the kids would have to learn the keywords and all that kind of mess. And she couldn't say, well, here's what I want to talk about. Here's how I would teach it. She had to read a script. I'm like, are you kidding me? I couldn't do that for 10 minutes without just wanting to pull my hair out and run out into the parking lot.
And that kind of situation, that's not just about teacher autonomy, right? That's something far worse. And it's about assuming that we don't know what our job is.
Right.
Right? Like, I went to graduate school. Like, I'm not a moron.
Yes. Trust us.
Right, yeah. But that kind of situation, that is why a lot of teachers quit. Because they're not teaching. They're not even allowed to teach. That's what giving a script does to a person.
Yep.
So that's a real problem. Recognition from students keeps me coming back. And even if it takes 4 years when they're even finished with college, when they come back and say, now I get it.
Mm-hmm.
That's really why I think majority of teachers stay for that reason too.
Yeah.
And once you've been in it a while, then they're coming back to talk to you.
Right.
And you kind of go, oh, okay, I guess I was onto something here.
Right.
And so it keeps you going. The reason I'm here is somebody I used to teach, right? And so it's wonderful. Those things keep going. I've been retired now 15 years, and there's tons of my kids keep up with me. And they want to know what's going on, and they'll, like you said, they'll write me a note and they go, you don't really remember. And I was like, yes, I remember you. And they'll say, but you were there when I needed you, or like you said, the things you were teaching us, it wasn't about the Pythagorean theorem. It was about life. Yeah. And it mattered. And I'm a different person for having been in that classroom. But if I was up there reading a script, or if all I was doing was focusing on test scores, totally different outcome. Your personality needs to come out as a teacher. Let teachers be who they are.
You can watch more content like this on the 11 Alive Plus streaming app and online at 11alive.com.